Hello and welcome back to Pilates with Marilyn. My name is Marilyn Harder. I'm a Pilates instructor and Pilates master trainer. This week is all about recovery. You worked very hard these past 6 weeks. Week number 7 is about recovery and release. So what you'll need today is some sort of stretching strap. I have a rope belt and either a trigger point ball or a baseball, lacrosse ball, a hard bouncy ball, something for a foot release. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's start with the ball on the floor, and I want you to find a place where you can balance. If you need to hang onto a wall or a counter or a chair, be sure to have one nice and close. That ball is going to start right underneath the ball of the big toe side of the foot, and your heel is going to be anchored to the floor. And you're going to slowly roll, pivoting on that heel towards the pinky side of the foot, and then roll it on back. We want to be moving about 1 inch a second. You also want to take the time to allow each knuckle of the toe to stretch. We're going to do 4 passes here. So that was 2, 1 each direction. And I've got most of my weight in my back foot. And my goal is to allow my front foot to really try to relax and release. Good. And when you get to a tight space, for me it's between my big toe and second toe, I want you to just start to shift a little bit of downward pressure to it. Now as we continue to release the feet, I want you to pay attention to anything that feels tight, sticky, sharp, stabbing, shooting. We don't want to push through things that are true pain. All right, let's go ahead and roll it to the ball of the big toe side of the foot. And we're going to slowly roll it towards the heel. So again, most of my weight is in my back standing foot, and I'm going to slowly roll towards that heel pocket. Moving about 1 inch a second. This is in our plantar fascia. So our plantar fascia is connective tissue that's on the bottom of the foot that actually there's a nice big sheet of fascia that runs all the way up the back side of the body, and it starts at the bottom of the foot. Runs up the side of the body, up and over, and can give you pressure headaches. Okay, so it might be very painful. You might notice there's a little bit of crunching. All of that is normal. Let's go ahead and move to the middle toe. Rolling down the center. Now, when I said painful, really what I meant is uncomfortable. So uncomfortable is pressure. Maybe you're like, oh, I don't want to be there for long, but it's not sharp or stabbing. That's okay pressure. And then roll it on back. My body is quivering just a little bit because it's a tender point. So if you get shaky, lightheaded, or dizzy, back off. Your body's saying, that's too much for me today. Good. Woo! I'm definitely feeling some feels there today. And let's move to the pinky side of the foot and slowly roll to that heel pocket again. Just like with the ball of the foot, we're moving at 1 inch a second, and we're doing a total of 4 passes. We spend so much time in a flat environment, both on shoes and concrete, that our bones in our feet don't get a chance to really mobilize in the way that we were built to mobilize. So this is another great way to work on flexibility and strength. So I want you to go ahead and put that ball right into your heel pocket. So it's right before that calcaneus bone on the heel. There's sort of some soft connective tissue. Let your leg melt over. Try and relax the top of that quad, the top of that leg, and start to shift your body weight forward. The goal is to feel your leg melt or your foot melt over the ball and not resist against it. So we're just going to let things release and relax. Breathing into that space. Because week 7 is all about recovery, you're probably going to want to save or bookmark this workout so that way you can continue to revisit it anytime your body says, I need it. Good. And let's go ahead and step on off. Now I want you to show you what actually we just did in your body. So if you need to hang on for balance, but I want you to find a nice parallel position with your body. Spread your toes out wide, with your feet. Making sure that the knees, hips, and shoulders are tracking over. And we're going to slowly lift up to a calf raise. As you do, you're going to notice a difference between the side we released and the side we didn't release. Notice how much more strength there is. Notice how much more stability there is. Notice how you feel you can go a little higher on the side we released versus the side we didn't. See if you can notice it a little higher on your leg. Maybe you can feel that work really build up into that glute fold on the side we released versus we didn't. So this is another reason to do these type of releases. So as we move to the other side, I'll tell you why. Anchor that heel, making sure the ball of the foot on the big toe side is on that ball, and we're going to pivot. I'm just going to turn the other direction so you guys can see. So when we release our fascia, I like to call it the internal cast system. So as a Bowen work practitioner, I work with myofascial release. So what we're doing right now is self-myofascial release. When we release it, our body, instead of being a nice tight web, will start to let go. And when it lets go, the muscle fibers, fascia, interlockings, we have more mobility of that tissue. And when we have more mobility of that tissue, we increase the strength and power into that tissue. So when it's nice and long and open and we ask it to do something, it can contract much further and faster. If we don't have that strength, or that release, we don't get quite as much output from our muscles. So recovery is such an important piece of all of our exercise. All right, so we're back at a place that feels sticky or tight on one of the knuckles of your feet. Just let the body weight kind of shift forward there, feel it melt as best as you can. I like to look at the knuckles of the ball of my foot and just see if they're turning white, because that's where I want that pressure. And that's where I also decide where I'm going to pause, is if one looks not quite as white as the others. It means it's a little more inflexible. All right, it's underneath the big toe side of the foot, and I'm going to slowly roll towards the heel. Another benefit of self-myofascial release and recovery is it moves us from our fight or flight position to rest and digest. So moving from our sympathetic nervous system, our go, 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 to our parasympathetic nervous system. So it's a great thing to do right before something that requires a lot of focus and attention. It's also great to wind down before bed. So my husband spends every single night 5 to 15 minutes stretching his entire body, and he sleeps more soundly with more recovery than anyone I've ever met. There really is something to be said about recovering every night before you go to sleep. Moving to the middle toe, and let's slowly roll to that heel pocket. Remember that some crunching is normal. We're mobilizing sticky tissue. So just be sure that you're staying at a pressure that your body is not seizing against. You want to melt over the ball. So it may require you to back off in certain spaces on the same roll. All right, once we're back at those knuckles, we're going to move to the pinky toe side and roll towards that heel pocket. Whew. Again, I'm getting a little shaky on this side, not lightheaded or dizzy, just my body is starting to have a little bit of a response. So I'm backing off my pressure, and then I stop shaking. It feels really good. I don't know if you've noticed, but the side we already released probably feels a little bit more solid underneath you. All right, let's go ahead and move that into the heel pocket, just before that calcaneus bone. Allow your leg to release there and try and let your foot just melt and relax over that ball. Remember, we want that quad, the top of that leg, to be nice and relaxed and quiet, and we're just shifting our body weight over it. Again, make sure you're not seizing up against it, but you're relaxing and releasing and melting over that ball. And then we'll go ahead and step on off. Making sure that ball is out of the way so you won't trip on it. Let's check in again. So toes are in front of heels in a parallel position. You're tall through the crown of your head. And let's go into a lower and lift. And I have a lot of power on both sides. I feel strong and connected. My ankles feel really strong, which is huge for me. Being hypermobile, I tend to have really wobbly ankles. So this is one of those huge benefits for me, is that I'm able to have a lot of ankle stability and strength. I was sort of calf raising at a diagonal. All right, we're going to go ahead and come down to the floor. Set that ball off to the side. You're not going to need it anymore. And make sure you have your stretching strap. So we're going to go ahead and start in a seated position. Feet are about hip distance apart. I've got my mat distance apart. And I'm going to hike my sits bones underneath me, getting nice and tall. Flexing my toes up towards the earth. And I'm going to start walking my fingertips forward. Imagine a bowling ball is coming at your abdominals. Activate against it. And you should feel some good stretch into that upper thoracic spine, which is the second section of the spine that's up by our rib cage. And I'm just going to take a couple good deep breaths there. It doesn't look active, but I'm really drawing in my abdominals. I'm really bracing and lengthening up here. And then I'm going to release and walk my hands forward. And just finding a place where I can try and flatten and lengthen out that low back. You can grab onto your toes if you can reach. And we're just going to breathe here a moment. So a good stretch lasts between 30 seconds and a minute. We tend to think a 10 to 15 second stretch is enough, but really we're not getting deep into those muscle fibers. They're still locked together. We want to really lengthen that relationship and get into the deeper muscle bundles and longer lasting flexibility. So I'm going to go ahead and take one more good deep breath. And now I'm going to let my head go and I'm going to round forward. So now I'm in my most released stretch. I have my feet, but I'm going to really let go of those arms. You can always tuck your hands underneath your calves. I don't want you pulling here. I want you trying to release here. I'm stretching down the fabric or the fascia down the back side of my back here. If you have disc issues or osteoporosis, be very mindful in this position. You don't want to put pressure on fragile bones and fragile discs. If you do not know what you're doing, I would stay in a flat back position and do not round at all. Every inhale, I'm allowing my body to be lifted a little higher. And every exhale, I'm letting go. Now I'm going to pull myself into it just a little bit more because my body says thank you. But listen to it. If it doesn't say thank you, don't go for it. Really let go of that head. Let it weigh 100 pounds. Going for the 3-dimensional breath, trying to breathe into my rib cage, all directions. And then I'm going to stack back up nice and tall. Let's go ahead and make our way laying down on the floor and grab that stretching strap. Hook the left foot into the strap. I like right at the ball of the foot so I can add a little flexion to the ankle. And I'm going to extend my other leg long as my back feels okay with it today. Which it doesn't quite, because that's my tight scoliosis side, so I'm going to leave my foot bent. Now you can roll your hands up into the strap, and you want to make sure that this hip is not hiking up. So you want to down slip it to square off those hips. And then I'm just going to let my arms be heavy. Letting the weight of my leg keep my arms in the air, and the weight of my arms stretch through the back of that fascia. And I'm trying not to push against it, or I'm trying to release against it. I also like to stretch in two directions, like stretching taffy. So I'm trying to drive my femur downwards, almost like you're trying to stick your butt out, stretching down in that direction while pulling up in this direction. You may notice I keep my knees slightly bent, and that is because I tend to hyperextend, and I don't want to dump into that joint. And you may notice my knee is slightly bent, and that's because I tend to hyperextend so I don't dump into the back of that joint. All right, now I'm going to take my right knee, that's my bent knee, open to the side, and I'm going to put both hands into that strap, and I'm going to allow that leg to open towards the left. Now my goal is to keep my hips square, and I'm going down as far as feels right to my body. I don't want my hips to roll to follow, so I'm trying to find that place where I get that stretch without that pressure. I'm going to take my arm out wide to counterbalance through the weight. And I'm stretching what's called the adductor. It's the inner thigh muscles. And I'm also stretching out my hip joint on my bent knee leg. Six good deep breaths. And I'm working hard not to arch through my low back. And then bring it back to center. And this time I am going to extend my leg a little bit more, making sure that left hip is down slipped, and I'm going to take that leg over and across the midline of the body. Now I only go as far as I can keep the stretch into that IT band and not into my low back. If you want a little bit more stretch, you can internally rotate, roll the knee towards your midline without hiking that hip. And then you should get right into that space. You can play with it a little bit by letting that leg go or pulling it in tighter, and find that best stretch for you. It's better for me when my knee is bent on this side today. If you also want to get a neck stretch, you can turn the head in the opposite direction. Arm is out wide. So I had a question on a previous workout. Let's go ahead and switch it to the other leg. On how do I activate my glutes when I'm in tabletop? And that has to do with how tight things are in your body. So if you have muscles that are really tight, they're fighting against, like, your calf muscles, your ankle, your Achilles, your plantar fascia, your hamstrings. They'll fight against your ability to engage your glute. So as we're stretching the other hamstring, I really want you to think about stretching in the two directions. The more open the whole leg is, the more you can activate your glute when it's time. So calves tend to inhibit, tight calves and tight Achilles inhibit our glute activation. So regular recovery, regular calf stretches will give you more support in the tabletop position, glutes against those lower abdominals, and keep that low back protected in the tabletop position. Well, hello, wind. I love you too. And that's about 6 good deep breaths there. So I'm going to go ahead and move both straps into my outer hand, making sure my hips are square. Letting that left one butterfly open, right opens wide, and I'm lowering down to that position where I can keep my hips squared, like I'm balancing a cup of coffee here. Now, if you're rolling, you're not getting any more stretch. You're actually just tweaking through the lower lumbar spine sacral joint, and we don't want that. So sometimes I have to walk my foot a little bit more on my left side towards the midline of my body to help balance my pelvis, or rest my arm there, or anchor my elbow that's holding my leg to allow it to relax. You might even find relaxing that leg on an ottoman or up against the wall will give you that space to really release into that inner thigh. You can look in the opposite direction, giving yourself that neck stretch. But just focus on those deep, complete breaths. If you want to add another dynamic to the stretch, you can add a little pelvic tilt there in either direction and maybe see if you feel a different stretch. Then we'll go ahead and bring it back up to center. Switch to the other hand. Make sure those hips are squared and take it across the midline of the body. Down, slipping those hips, taking that arm out wide. Gazing open. Remember, you can internally rotate just a bit to get a deeper stretch, which feels delightful on this side. And go ahead and bring it back to center. All right, we're going into a figure 4 stretch now. If you want a deeper stretch in that figure 4 stretch, you can take the strap, put it on the bottom of your bottom foot, taking that other leg across, and then you can pull it on in. So I get a nice good stretch here in figure 4. When my strap is on and I slightly bend the knee, I start to get a little bit more pressure. Now, you don't want any torque within that knee. We just want that deep glute med here. So I'm going to show you a couple options. This is option 1. It's a really deep stretch. Option 2 is more relaxing, foot down on the floor, pressing open on that knee. And option number 3, I'm going to walk my bottom foot, so it's my right foot, till it's in line with my left hip, and I'm going to allow my whole body to rotate. And so this will give you both a hip stretch and a QL stretch, which is the muscle that runs from hip to rib cage in kind of the side quadrant of your back. Now that one can tend to spasm if it's protecting a disc, so be really mindful in this position. Excessive rotation is not good for osteoporosis and disc issues, so this one may not be for you, as well as hip bursitis in the hip may not like this stretch. So pick your poison, and we'll take 3 more good deep breaths. Try and release into the movement. And bring it back to center. Let's go ahead and pick what you would like for your other side. Either the strap in figure 4, regular figure 4, or that rotated figure 4. I'm walking my bottom left foot in line with my right hip and allowing that whole complex to rotate. Arms are wide, shoulder blades are flat against the mat, and I'm allowing my head, neck, and shoulders to release. I like to use my rib cage to still activate and close the ribs to try and keep neutral and deepen that stretch. But otherwise, just think a nice, really good freeing breath. Our stretch and release time is a really good time to do our deep belly breath. So in Pilates, we always talk about our rib cage breathing because it keeps our abs activated. Our deep belly breath drops our diaphragm, and it's the most releasing and relaxing breath. So rather than being an active breath, it's a relaxing breath. So those are the two differences in utilizing those breaths in our practice. And we'll take 2 more good deep slow breaths. Making our way back to center. And I'm going to use a little rocking motion. Just to release anything that built up, little circles. Because of my scoliosis, I do like to try and reset neutral after a rotational stretch. It's better for my body. And I'm going to rock back up to a seated position. All right, we're going to do one more thing before we're done today, and that is a chest stretch, shoulder stretch. So grabbing our strap again, I want you to take your arms out to a low V, and I'm going to roll my shoulders up, back, and down, and I'm going to start to take those arms up. And at any point you feel any resistance, you pause. So right about here, I'm going to draw the back of my armpit down, and I'm going to try and just let gravity take my arms back behind me. I'm hypermobile, so it's easy for me to draw my shoulders up and go way further than is natural. So I really want to draw my shoulders down and stay with anatomical range. I've got to slightly bend my elbows to also maintain that anatomical range. And if you feel things build up in your neck, just look over one side and the other. And go ahead and bring it back to center. All right, great job today. Hopefully you feel really relaxed and rejuvenated. And as you redo this episode, it's really nice to just stay mindful and with your breath. So I would encourage you, once you've got the movements and anatomical alignment down and you're connected to your body, mute me. Just follow along with it, stay with your breath, maybe put on some peaceful music, and enjoy. Thank you so much for joining me today in recovery. I encourage you to intermix this with your workouts. So maybe every 4th day, do your workouts 3 days, recovery of 4th, and just stay with it. Practice self-care. You're worth it. Thank you so much for joining me today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.